Show. Thanks so much for being here. Today on the big program, lots to get to, lots to talk about. Over the weekend, I came across a George Carlin quote, and I so miss George Carlin. Right now, we need that voice of sanity, of reason, today more than ever. But Carlin, back in 1999, wrote, "Angry men in combat fatigues talking to God on two-way radio and muttering incoherent slogans about freedom are eventually going to provide us with a great deal of entertainment, especially after your stupid blanking economy collapses." George always had such colorful language. But 1999, and if you look at Saturday, Saturday was that day of entertainment. As the Proud Boys, the white supremacists, the Trumpkins came out, and look, not all Trump supporters were there. The good, solid, white supremacist, racist Christian ones were, though. And they were out in full numbers because they believe the election's been stolen. And they believe that they're going to threaten their way to stopping it. And this is a problem, folks. This is the problem with the radical right and the extreme that has been allowed to fester for too long in this country. And it's time that, good, decent people stand up and say, it's over. I mean, Donald Trump himself said, Joe Biden won, but it was rigged. And you go, prove it. And they have filed numerous lawsuits across the country. Nothing. This is one of those moments where it's over. Everyone knows it's over, but they're going to try and raise a boatload of money off of it right now by giving the faithful the illusion that they're going to be able to overturn our ballot box. And this is a very dangerous moment. And while I find the humor of Carlin fantastic, that there were a bunch of nitwits out there who did provide some entertainment, much like the guy who with the Confederate flag claiming that he was part of the party of Lincoln. Let that sink in for just a second. But the dangerous part of this is, they're attempting to undo a democratic election. In this country, we get to choose our leaders. Our leaders don't choose us, we choose them, and we go to the ballot box and we do that. And when we cast our ballot, we expect it to be counted. And we expect that ballot to be respected. Not to throw a temper tantrum, not to throw a hissy fit, not to put our country at risk, but to actually, respect the ballot. This is just one of those things where, we've always had elections and we've always had the outcomes respected, even in those moments. And look, I complained about 2016. I complained about 2000. There were tons of irregularities. But for the good of the country, you always had people who stepped forward and said, for the good of the country, we're going to move forward. We're not in that moment anymore. We're in the moment where we have a petulant child in the White House who believes he is entitled to being the leader of this country. And the thing is we've always been the envy of the world. Always. Because we've always had a peaceful and democratic transfer of power. We've never had to drag a leader out of the White House kicking and screaming, but that may happen. I mean, look, we went through Civil War, we went through a Great Depression, we went through previous pandemics, we went through 2 world wars. We did all this stuff in times of turmoil and still respected the outcome of the ballot box. And we've got Donald Trump who, is telling us straight out. Today he tweeted out, "I won the election." No, you didn't. The ballots were counted and you lost. A perfect example. Today, and this is one of those things you really can't make up. Jason Miller, one of Trump's former advisors, said, "Hey, we found thousands of ballots in Georgia. Thousands of them." It was actually 2,600. Somehow these thousands, 2,600, were going to flip the election. And when they actually counted them, Trump got 1,800 of got 800 of the 2,600. Joe Biden got 1,800, which means his lead expanded even more. And look, I'm all in favor. Count every ballot, because I believe you respect what that ballot box says, because we don't have a country without it. And for all those people who call themselves patriots, who are running around wearing flag underwear, patriotism isn't just about screaming the loudest. It's about fighting for the stability of our nation, especially in a moment when we have someone like Donald Trump in the White House. Reality, Americans have gone to the polls. They cast their ballots. Election officials have counted them. There have been numerous lawsuits. Trump has filed lawsuit after frivolous lawsuit after frivolous lawsuit, only to have the vast majority of them thrown out and the rest pulled back because they were losers. Now, look, I'm a big supporter. Go through, pursue every legal avenue, but you can't stop the transition. That puts our country at risk. And right now, our country, every day that Donald Trump throws a hissy fit, every day that he throws his temper tantrum, every day that we don't have a smooth transition of power come January 20th is another day closer to chaos that we have. We've got real problems. And since Election Day, I've been saying we got to get to work. We've got infrastructure that needs to be built. We've got a pandemic that needs to be crushed. We've got an economy that needs to be rebuilt. We've got so much to do, and yet we've got a petulant child in the White House who kicking and screaming and I won. No, you didn't. The votes aren't there. Sorry, not happening. Joe Biden is president-elect. We need to be moving forward in helping him transition into the next administration. And this is the thing. Joe Biden won by more votes, got more votes than any president in history, and beat an incumbent by more votes. In fact, he had a higher percentage of the vote of any challenger since FDR. He had 306 electoral votes, something that Trump in 2016 called a landslide. It is time that we respect that vote and we move forward. Biden did something that hasn't been done in 72 years. He flipped both Arizona and Georgia. So here's the reality. It's over. It's time to transition. It's time to move our country forward and allow Joe Biden, the president-elect, to move forward with his team. And for all of us to gather around and say, look, we respect the election. It's what happened when Donald Trump became president. I said he's our president. I fear there's chaos. I fear there's major turmoil. But we'll see what he comes out with. Here's the difference. I don't see Joe Biden coming out with anything divisive. I see him coming out with things that are going to unite us, that are going to move us forward, and not destroy who we are as a country. And the longer this transition is held up, the 9/11 Commission, if you remember them back the early part of the century, they said that a slowed transition could harm national security. We're in a really scary moment. And the idea that every day we're holding things up and every day there's concern that the Trump administration is going to throw tons of roadblocks in the way. At the last minute, they're going to throw up a bunch of rules and regulations that are going to tie the next administration into knots. Because, well, they're throwing their temper tantrum. Because here's the thing, we're in this weird moment. On Friday, last Friday, 184,000 new cases of the coronavirus. Over 10 million. 1,000 people are dying a day, and it's exploding. Our hospital beds are full. We're now getting to the worst part of this. Now, look, there's some great news. There really is. A couple of companies have come forth and said, hey, we've got a vaccine 95% accurate. Going to get millions of doses real soon. That doesn't help us through the next couple of months. This virus is raging out of control, and we don't have any leadership coming out of D.C. Nothing. And this is one of those moments where you just go, everything that we're seeing coming out of the sideshow that is the Trump administration is to distract us, is to delay what is the inevitable in the hopes that they can dream up something that the American people are going to bite on. You know, every day my email box is full of people going, we found it, the smoking gun. Now, are there problems with our election system that I have problem with? Oh, absolutely. The voting machines are a horrible idea. We should have never gone to that direction, but we did. And I find it ironic that now that we've been using them all these years and the left has been questioning them, the right is now finally going, see, look, there's something wrong. Well, these are the rules that we've been playing under all this time. If there is a real problem, and I have a problem with electronic voting machines, the next administration will hopefully move forward on changing how we vote. I got to tell you, I really liked how I was able to vote here in Pennsylvania where I live. I requested a mail-in ballot. They sent it to my house. I got it. I looked it over. I filled it out. I put it in its little secret envelope. I stuffed it in its little travel envelope. I signed it. My numbers were all on it. I made sure everything was correct. Went over to the county election office and I dropped it in the box. The box guarded by a sheriff's deputy wearing a mask. Next day, I got an email saying, hey, we got your vote. It's here. For me, that's the way forward. A hand-marked paper ballot. Because you know what they can do with that piece of paper? If there's a question, they can go back and recount it. And then count it again and again and again. Which is what the Trump campaign wants to do in Georgia, in Wisconsin. Not going to change the output. And look, I'm in favor. Count the votes. Count them. Count everyone. Every vote matters. But you can't delay what we already know is the inevitable. And that is Joe Biden is president-elect. On January 20th, he will be the person who raises his hand, puts his hand on the Bible, and swears to uphold and defend the Constitution of these United States. And we will get behind Joe Biden and move, hopefully, this country forward. Now, here's my problem. My problem is we're horribly divided. And as I've been trying to talk about over the last couple of weeks, how do we come back to somewhere near center stage? How is it that we come back? And fortunately, I having the platform that I have, I've had a bunch of Trump supporters reach out and say, well, you should stop calling us racist. And I go, okay, stop being racist. Stop associating with the people that were out on Saturday, who were the Proud Boys, who were proud to say that they were white supremacists. Stay away from them. Purge them from your movement. And then we're okay. And then we can talk about policy, because some of them actually did want to talk about the policy that they wanted. And I'm all in favor of that. But the reality is, it is what it is. And while I know all Trump supporters aren't racist, I do believe all racists are Trump supporters. I think we saw that on Saturday with these throngs of crazy, angry people who have been fed, well, their version of the truth. And this is the weird part in all of this. We live in a world where there is no truth anymore. And the ballot box used to be that place we used to believe in. What's interesting is the guy who's the Secretary of State of Georgia, and I can never say his name right, so not even going to try. I think it's something, Brad Raffensparger. But Brad's now coming out saying, look, the election is what it was. The outcome, once we recount, probably isn't going to change. And claims he's getting heavy pressure from Republicans and Lindsey Graham and everyone else to, well, exclude a bunch of those ballots. Legal ballots that people cast, that they had the right to cast, so that they can change the outcome. And this is a dangerous moment. Because I'll give Brad credit. He is a patriot for standing up, for doing his job. For not bowing to the pressure that's on him, and it's got to be overwhelming. The entire Republican Party focused on you. And Georgia, where the entire country is focused right now. We have so much to do and such a little time to do it. And what's frustrating and angering is, we've spent 2 weeks of that time bickering and fighting over what's apparent. Donald Trump lost. Doesn't get any simpler than that for me. Trump lost the election. It's over. We now rebuild. Now, here's the thing. If I'm the Republicans, I'm thrilled. Because you've purged Donald Trump from the head of your ticket. You no longer have that chaos. But you didn't get slaughtered in the Senate like everybody thought you would. And in fact, you picked up some seats in the House, and you won Pennsylvania. If not for Joe Jorgensen. So if I'm the Republican Party, I'm feeling pretty good about it. I'm feeling pretty good about, hey, you know what? All we got to do is swing a little bit this way, get away from the insanity, bring someone who's a little more rational. Same policies, same craziness, but more rational and less of a lightning rod. And we got problems in this country. So over the next 2 years, we got a lot of reaching across the aisle and reaching out and talking to each other to do. Or we're going to be right back here in 4 years. And it's going to be worse. Because the next person, I believe, will be far worse. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Where do we go? Do you see us coming together, or continued polarization as we've seen over the last 4 years? You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
There's nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2.
On this day in labor history, the year was 2006. That was the day mounted police charged 50 janitors and their supporters during a protest in Houston. SEIU's Justice for Janitors campaign had been organizing for years throughout the South and Southwest. Modeled on success achieved in California, SEIU broadened their campaign to Houston and Miami. The union called a month-long strike against the city's largest cleaning companies. Protests and civil disobedience actions continued throughout the strike. Hundreds of strikers routinely marched through the streets of Houston, beating drums and hauling bags of garbage into the middle of intersections to highlight the key services they provided to the city. They were subject to repeated threats of firings and arrests. When police charged at the janitors, it served to turn public support in favor of the strikers. By the end of the month, Tom Balanoff and SEIU Local 1 in Chicago claimed victory for 5,300 Houston janitors. The Chicago local had been central to the 3-year campaign in Houston. Incomes doubled, and janitors finally had health insurance, paid vacations, and holidays. The Chicago Tribune detailed the campaign in a November 25th article. The union lobbied building owners and major corporations who held contracts with the cleaning companies. The union worked to gain a foothold among the janitors, sending in seasoned Latino janitors from Chicago to help with organizing. SEIU committed millions of dollars to the organizing drive, setting aside $1 million alone in strike funds. At a victory rally, union leader Flor Aguiar proclaimed, "No one thought a group of poor Latinos from Houston would be able to win anything. But today, we can lift our heads up very high."
For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter @laborhistoryin2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So while we're looking at the weekend's entertainment, that is the people with the flag underwear, screaming how patriotic they are, while screaming at anyone who disagrees with them that they're un-American and they love Trump. Yeah, while we're paying attention to that, the world's still focused on Georgia. Georgia is the center of the universe. Everything right now is, for the next month and a half, 2 months, is going to be nothing but Georgia. And here to share some thoughts, not just on Georgia, but where we are as a country. I've asked Max Burns to come talk with us. Max is a Democratic strategist, also a national columnist for the Daily Beast. Max, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start with Georgia. Georgia is obviously the center of the world. If Democrats are able to pull off a miracle and grab those 2 Senate seats, we might actually get something done.
Absolutely. And in all of this stress about the transition and all of the stress about these special elections, I don't think Democrats should lose sight of the fact that we won Georgia, that Joe Biden and African-American voters tore down a big chunk of Donald Trump's big red wall in the South, even in the face of voter suppression, even in the face of attacks on mail-in voting. Democrats did it. And now, if we can do it once, that's a great sign that we can do it again for John Ossoff. We can do it again against David Perdue. And we can actually bring this Senate into Democratic control.
Yeah, I now see the Republicans are pulling out the big guns. Karl Rove, or as he was affectionately known during the Bush administration, Turd Blossom. Evidently, Turd Blossom is in charge of the Georgia Battleground Fund. He's the chief fundraiser for Perdue and Loeffler. They're bringing out the big guns.
They really are. They're bringing all the great names of this terrible era in American history. The same people who have lost almost every intervening race since the Bush years. But if they're bringing in all of the DC Beltway consultants that people like Kelly Loeffler claim to hate so much, it's a sign that they're really shaken. And if you've seen the numbers that Ossoff and Warnock did in that runoff, and if you've seen where they're polling now, the GOP has reason to be concerned. In a fair vote, these are real toss-up races.
Ultimately, that's the point, though. And we're hearing a lot from Trump and his supporters of how, it's all rigged, it's all all fraudulent. And yet, you go back over the last couple of election cycles, it's been the Republicans who have masterfully been able to put a number of roadblocks in the way to keep people from voting and also chuck them off the rolls.
And it's more, like you say, it's more than just words in the case now. We've actually seen that the Georgia Secretary of State, an elected Republican, just went public today saying that Lindsey Graham pressured him to try and find workarounds to throw out legal ballots. This is something that, let's be honest, the South has always been leading the way in voter suppression since the days of Jim Crow. They've made this into an art form. But for a senator to just call the Secretary of State of another state and ask them to throw out legal ballots is something more akin to election fraud and something that should be fully investigated in Congress.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that Lindsey Graham would get involved in this is quite remarkable to me. And I mean, Graham's an interesting character in that, he was really at the beginning as anti-Trump as anyone, very pro John McCain. McCain dies. Now you got to find someone else to kiss up to. Now he's with his girlfriend. He's with Trump now. It's just a very bizarre kind of guy.
Well, Graham is what you look at when that's what you become when you lose a moral compass, when you just start pursuing power for its own sake. And it is to Brad Raffensperger, the Georgia Secretary of State's credit, that he said, no, I won't even entertain this. And he did more, it can be argued, than almost anyone in the Trump administration has done, and actually come forward immediately in public to say that this was asked of him, that it was wrong, and he refused to do it. No. So at least there seems to be some effort, at least, to push back against this outright vote rigging.
No, you're absolutely right. In fact, a moment ago, I said this is what a patriot looks like. If we need an example, right here is a guy who, in the face of what has got to be overwhelming pressure, to come forth and do what is the right thing. And I'm not saying that just because they went to Joe Biden, but it is what it is. If we don't respect the results of the ballot box, we have nothing as a nation.
No, absolutely. And it's the idea that even counting every legal vote which is what the president asked for a few days ago. Now we're not even saying count every legal vote. We're saying count every Republican vote. And I'll tell you, for people who spent 4 years calling me a liberal snowflake, I have never seen a mental breakdown quite on the scale of what happened when Republicans lost Georgia. These are states and demographics they truly think belong to them. And they will justify any efforts to take those back from Democrats. Unfortunately, they don't have much of a policy platform, so we're just not going to count votes.
Yeah. No, they don't. They actually don't have a policy platform. If you looked at the RNC's platform, they don't have one. They just deferred to whatever dear leader wanted, which was a nice joke for a while. But it's kind of sad that the party has gone that far adrift. But here's the thing, Max, and look, this was a landslide victory for Joe Biden, 306 electoral votes. But I look at a state like Pennsylvania, very divided. I look at a state like Georgia, trending towards Democrats, still very divided. What do you see, going forward, Joe Biden being able to do to kind of win those people over and keep us going in a positive direction, even though we've got Trump doing everything that they can do to delay and distract us from Biden moving forward in a transition?
Joe Biden really laid that out pretty well in his press conference today, where he said if it has to be January 20th before his administration can get intelligence briefings, that's unfortunate, and it's a risk to national security, but he will proceed with that. Unfortunately, this partisan country that we've inherited is only being made worse by the president, by Republicans in Congress, by outlets like Fox News, which are rapidly now trying to backpedal and stifle all of this anti-intellectual, anti-authority rage they've cultivated. And I just, honestly, I'm in awe a bit of Joe Biden. I don't have his patience to continue putting my hand forward to get slapped by Republicans. But there's indications that these independent voters that helped put Biden over the top in Michigan and Wisconsin are seeing that as an honest effort to reach out to Republicans. So we may actually be nearing the end of this period where Republicans can obstruct and divide without any remorse and really face no consequences. So it'll be interesting to see in 2021 in Virginia and a few local races, and then in 2022 with the House, just how exhausted Americans have become with what is sure to be some spectacular Republican obstruction in the Senate these first 2 years.
No, absolutely. So the question then becomes, do you see it without the 2 seats in Georgia going to Democrats? Do you see anything that Biden is able to accomplish in his first 2 years? Now, I know there are some who say, well, there are going to be some Republicans who in the first year are going to want to work with him because they got re-election problems, but you still got Mitch McConnell who's not going to move anything. And the Senate rules are in such a way that good luck going against the leadership. So I don't really see a lot getting done through the legislative process, but I'm curious your thoughts.
So there are a few avenues Joe Biden has, one of which is to use this same expanded executive order authority that President Trump pioneered to actually turn that from exclusion and division into effective action by restoring LGBTQ protections, by reinstating DACA, by ending these immigration policies that are inhumane and illegal. Those things won't require Congress, nor will stopping this insane build the wall mantra that the president ran and lost on. What will require Congress is comprehensive COVID emergency unemployment assistance. And that's something that we're seeing more and more pressure even now from groups like Extend PUA, who are fighting with the Republican Senate, who are keeping Democrats energized and motivated to pass legislation. And quite honestly, if we don't see serious action on that soon, there will be people in the streets who have lost their homes, who have had to make choices between childcare and medication. And that is not a position Mitch McConnell wants to be in, because historically he has not handled popular uprisings well.
Yeah, but here's the thing, Max. I mean, I've been saying the exact same thing for the last several months. I thought we should have had another stimulus bill back end of May, June, July, August, September, October, nothing. And McConnell, in the face of overwhelming pressure, has said, we're just not going to do it. In fact, came out the other day and said he doesn't see an appetite for doing a big plan like Democrats would want, things that I think we agree we need. So do you see him continuing that? Because look, he won handily re-election. He's there another 6 years, whether we like it or not.
Yeah, and one of the unfortunate realities is that we're going to have to find ways around him where possible. We're going to have to take really energetic executive action where we can to help people who are out of work because of COVID. But I also think that there's some room here for maneuver. You saw last week the Senate, Mitch McConnell specifically, very clearly said, thanks but no thanks to the Treasury Secretary, Steve Mnuchin's continued efforts to get this deal going. He says, going forward, we're going to have the Senate take more of a leadership role in this, which tells me that they're done dealing with the Trump administration. They know that's a dead letter, and they're going to start talking behind the scenes with Joe Biden. And I genuinely believe that it may not be everything we want, but that Joe Biden is capable of getting Republicans on board for a comprehensive COVID re-up, a second CARES Act.
Right.
And I think all it needs is a little cooling down period where they can negotiate privately, where Joe Biden can work the relationships he's built in the Senate over his career. And we may actually have something shortly after his inauguration.
I hope you're right, but my problem is I know Mitch McConnell. There are going to be some pounds of flesh that I know that they're going to demand cuts to Social Security because, hey, we can't afford it. The A word will be back. We're going to hear about austerity an awful lot, and killing off the things what little social safety net we have left. One of my great fears is that we're going to end up trading away things for our short-term ability to survive that long-term are going to jump up and bite us.
And that's one of the areas where I think Joe Biden really needs to be innovative here by bringing in people into the cabinet or into senior advisory roles like Andrew Yang, who seems to have very effective working relationships with a lot of Republicans who have nothing good to say about Democrats. And Republicans I've spoken to agree that Andrew Yang has a gift for sort of messaging Democratic economic ideas into language Republicans can take home to voters. And if we can bring Yang in, if we can bring in pragmatic progressives who have a background in these economic issues, I think there's definitely room to carve something out.
Yeah,
go ahead.
No, but here's the thing. I mean, Andrew Yang's UBI is not a liberal idea. It's a very conservative idea. It was Milton Friedman's idea back in the 60s. It's what eventually became the earned income tax credit during the Reagan years. So he's taking what were conservative ideas, turning them into something of liberal ideas, and then selling them back. If I'm taking your thought process right, because it's stuff that conservatives should be buying into anyway. We need consumers. We need people with disposable income who can keep a roof over their head.
Yeah, and Kamala Harris, Andrew Yang, Pete Buttigieg all have great strengths in the sense that I think they realize that we're not talking about a Republican Party that necessarily believes anything, a Republican Party that is conservative or cares about Milton Friedman. It's a party that just wants to win and will make whatever deals it feels increase its hand for upcoming elections. And that's something that we're just going to have to learn to accept. And I think it also opens up opportunities on criminal justice reform, on economic policy, on trade, to actually do some good things for the country.
No, I sure hope you're right. Now, in this transition period, which obviously is on hold at this moment, although Joe Biden came out and named his chief of staff, there's been some names jumping around. There are a few that I'm absolutely opposed of, one of them being John Kasich, anywhere near the administration. I'm sorry, I can't have the guy who rammed through right-to-work laws in Ohio and told labor you're going to have to get on the bus or we're going to run you over. Can't have him in this administration. Just sends the absolute wrong message to me.
And Kasich, besides just cutting union protections, besides working for years of his governorship to ban abortion, to make things tougher on women, promised to deliver Ohio for Joe Biden. What happened? We lost by 8 points. I don't think it's a lot to ask that if Republicans come hat in hand now looking to launder their reputation after enabling this last 4 years, that they actually have achieved something for Joe Biden. Right. But no one can really say that so far.
Do you see any of the Republican names that have been floated? And there have been a few. Obama had, if I remember right, off the top of my head. He was defense secretary for a little bit. Chuck Hagel was his defense secretary, former
Yeah.
Republican senator. Every administration tries to reach across the aisle with someone. Do you see anyone?
There have been a few names floated, Kasich among them, which I think is just such a non-starter with the progressive base that's going nowhere. Another that's been floated is Meg Whitman, who was the CEO of Hewlett Packard. She bankrupted Quibi in record time. About the only thing she's been able to do is fail upwards, leaving a disastrous record of corporate failures behind her. That would be a nightmare to put in charge of a country struggling with an economic crisis in addition to a COVID crisis. The challenge is so many of these Republican spots, say LaHood on transportation under Obama, for example, or Chuck Hagel, were designed to buy political capital on the Hill. And I think Democrats accurately assess that there's just not a lot of political capital to be bought right now, that's not going to get you anything. So why upset your own base?
That's a good point. That's an excellent point. And I had forgotten about LaHood because he was supposed to bring us some transportation money. And again, that giant infrastructure plan that I was hoping was going to happen isn't. Do you see, I guess, last question I have, because for me, infrastructure has been something I've been talking about for every year I've been doing this program, that every administration should have a giant infrastructure plan because we need it. Do you see Biden moving forward and trying to get something like this and bringing Republicans on board?
Yeah, I think when Joe Biden takes the oath of office, we will still technically be in, I think, the 100th week of Trump's infrastructure week. We're still waiting on the infrastructure plan, but it's a good theme to start rolling with. And the president-elect has been very clear that he has put forward a national plan for investing in infrastructure that merges clean tech and green climate security with infrastructure spending. And that's really where we need to go. If you look at how President Roosevelt sustained people out of work during the Depression, infrastructure work can be socially distanced, it can be done outdoors, it pays well, and it creates a skill set that is very employable.
Yeah, absolutely something we need. Max, I appreciate the time. As always, great talking with you. Max Burns, the national columnist for the Daily Beast. As always, buddy, I appreciate your time, man.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much, Max. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1982. That Tuesday, the National Football League players ended their 57-day strike. The league scrambled to get the new season going, scheduling games for that very next Sunday. The shortened 9-game season included 2 games played before the walkout, and the rest after the strike ended. The biggest issue that led to the strike was compensation and benefits. The NFL had seen a surge in television revenue with a new 5-year contract worth $2.1 billion. The players asked for 55% of the league's growing profits. The Players Association also wanted a minimum pay scale based on years of service and improvements in healthcare and retirement benefits. The owners flatly refused. On September 20th, the Green Bay Packers beat the New York Giants in a Monday night football game. The next day, the New York Daily News reported, quote, "For the first time in its 63-year history, labor troubles will throw the NFL for a loss." By a unanimous vote of its executive committee, the league's Players Association yesterday voted to call a strike. The article continued by writing, quote, "The players stressed that they had been forced to call the strike in frustration over what they termed management's twin failures to take them seriously and to bargain in good faith." Sports Illustrated summed up fan sentiments about the strike with a cover headline reading, over the image of a deflated football. Finally, the two sides came to an agreement. The players won raises, bonuses based on years in the league, and severance packages for retiring players. But the gains were far below the union's goals. Bitterness lingered, and 5 years later, the players would be on strike once again. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So in all of this, you still have the Trump administration and the General Services Administrator, the appointee, Emily Murphy, who's still refusing to make the determination that Joe Biden is president-elect, and then allow him to do some of the transition stuff, get some of the information that he needs, and some of the funding as well, which means, again, we're just stopping the next administration and really handcuffing them until, well, our toddler in chief decides his tantrum is over. Because look, the election's over. He lost. It's that simple. Now we just have to get through the tantrum phase so that we can move forward. Here to share some thoughts on, well, how we do that, I've asked Jeff Hauser to come talk with us. Jeff is the executive director of the Revolving Door Project at the Center for Economic and Policy Research. The revolvingdoorproject.org is their website. Jeff, thanks for taking time for us.
My pleasure.
So we have Emily here, who's a Trump appointee, who has decided she's just not going to recognize Joe Biden as president-elect. So everything stops. The wheels of our transition stops. I'm getting emails of, hey, can you chip in $5 so that we can help our next president actually have a transition? To me, criminal.
Yes, it is absolutely criminal. I mean, it calls into question why this is a job held by a political appointee rather than a career civil servant who will just, dot the I's, cross the T's, and play it straight. But yeah, Emily Murphy is a Trump political appointee. By the end of the Trump administration, they have pretty much perfected the art of installing cronies across the executive branch. The General Service Administration is one of those jobs that most people don't think about. But if you're someone like Donald Trump, it's really important to you. If you're Donald Trump, the GSA can help you make the Trump Hotel as profitable as possible. And now it can help you prevent a fair and free transition to the actual winner of the election, Joe Biden. That's really dangerous in terms of Joe Biden's ability to provide leadership to the country, for he and his team to learn what is going on in the world and within the government that they're about to run. It's dangerous in that regard. And the funniest story is that Murphy herself is looking for a job because she knows she's going to be out of work on January 20th. But she is not taking that realistic understanding and applying it to her actual day job because her first loyalty is to, as you said, the toddler in chief.
Yeah, well, maybe Donald will give her a job at whatever he does next. Maybe on his legal defense team. I don't know, but it's just, again, another one of these moments where, like you said, I want a boring bureaucrat in that position. I don't want more patronage, and this administration has been all about the patronage.
Yeah, they understand that if the country won't get outraged when you break laws and shatter norms, then there's a lot to profit from it. Sometimes you can profit in ways that will help you win votes, the way like Donald Trump emblazoned his name all over the CARES Act relief checks that went out to most Americans. That was just smart branding by Donald Trump, but the type of thing that in the past would have been deemed a scandal. If Barack Obama had done something similar in 2009, Fox News would have made a big deal out of it. But Nancy Pelosi and the House Democrats didn't make a big deal out of it. And so that was a way that Trump used the executive branch, to gain politically. Yep. He's obviously using the executive branch to profit personally. And now he's using it to obstruct Joe Biden. Is he keeping secrets from the Biden administration about what Trump has done improperly? Is he delaying the understanding of either the substantive scandals or the corruption scandals of the Trump years? I mean, there are a lot of different things he might be accomplishing right now, but none of them advance the interests of the American people.
Or just plain petulance. I mean,
that too.
I mean, sometimes it's the straightest line between 2 points. But to be honest, I was one of the people mocking the fact that he had to have his giant signature all over everything. And I hearkened back to when George W. Bush kind of did the same thing. If you remember when they sent out the $300, when our Bush prizes were coming, they sent out a letter saying, "Hey, your Bush prize might be coming. Check your mailbox." And they spent a boatload of money doing it. I don't know why they just couldn't put it in that envelope and send it to me, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I agree. It's like kind of comical, but I think because a lot of American people don't know how government works, which is why in the long run, programs like yours are important, because we really need people to be educated about how government works, because they can't be good citizens unless they understand it. And so I think a lot of people probably assume that the Trump signature is somewhat significant as to what role he had to play in them getting that money. And if you're looking at the electoral results and the improvements in, like, say, South Texas that Donald Trump enjoyed, I mean, it's anecdotal, but there are a lot of people who said that they really appreciated the check that Donald Trump and the government cut them. And do they understand the role that the House Democrats played in that negotiation? Probably not.
No.
Do they know that the Democrats offered a bill in May of this year that was pretty good, the HEROES Act? But I don't think they do. And so sometimes you have to belabor the obvious in order for it to get through when people are really busy and they don't have the time to pay attention to stuff.
No, you're right.
They know it.
No, you're right on. And this is why I had said all through the summer that I thought Mitch McConnell was trying to undermine Trump's reelection, because a second stimulus, I think, would have gone even further. Having that signature and more coming in for people, I think that would have gone even further to help him in the election. And and McConnell just was never going to let that happen.
Yeah, it is actually, I mean, because the election was obviously closer than I thought, in 2016, I had a lot of nagging fears. This cycle, I was pretty blithely confident in ways that do not look good in retrospect. And yeah, given how close, it wasn't that close an election, but it was also not like that not close. Yeah, I don't know what McConnell is thinking. It's very confusing why they didn't do a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm with you. Now, look, January 20th, 2021, President-elect Joe Biden will be sworn in. He will become our next president. He's going to have a lot of work to do. He's going to need a big broom and a big shovel because we got a lot to clean up. What do you think the first course of action is? I saw, Chuck Schumer announced that Biden was going to forgive up to $50,000 in student loan debt sometime during the first 100 days. Is that the first thing? What do you see as one of the first things out?
I think it's really important that the Biden team not do things sequentially, but do everything simultaneously. And by that, I mean, if you have 15 traditional cabinet departments and a bunch of other senior appointees across the executive branch, you want them during your transition to be planning on first day actions and to do all of them at the same time. And so it's not that the education department's ed program is the first thing that Biden does, or the EO that Biden signs is the first thing. I think you should convey the energy of an administration by having each and every department make positive strides on day one to show that there's a new boss in town. And this is a boss who's committed to the public interest, not just enriching himself. And I think that's the key thing. And that way people can kind of glom onto the action that resonates the most with them. And so some people, that's going to be something out of the agriculture department. Other people, it's going to be something at the Homeland Security and the war on immigrants. Other people, it's going to be the education department, the labor department, you name it. I think the key is both the perception and reality of high energy activism from Biden appointees.
Now the question then becomes, we keep hearing a lot of Republican names being thrown up into this. Do you see many Republicans in the administration?
I do not. I mean, maybe I'm being too optimistic. It's not something I'm typically accused of, but it definitely happens on occasion. I thought the election was going to go a fair bit better than it did. But I am skeptical. I mean, you look at some of the names being mentioned. Somebody like John Kasich has long been at odds with organized labor in the state of Ohio. It seems a little incongruous to empower somebody like Kasich when you're a pro-labor Democrat like Joe Biden. Charlie Dent, who's a lobbyist, from out in Pennsylvania, former congressman. I just don't see the appeal. I just don't think anyone really thinks you're going to gain votes that way. I'm skeptical of it. And there are also a lot of Democrats who want these jobs. In fact, like, a lot of what Biden has to do now is choose between a bunch of senior Democrats of varying ideologies and experiences who are vying for these jobs. I think saying, none of you get it, I'm going to give it to a Republican, it doesn't make much sense to me.
That's not going to be helpful. But for me, I'm with you. I think it has to be just an onslaught of stuff so that it all can't be stopped. That something gets through, and I think infrastructure's got to be a big part of it. I think the education component is a big part of it. We've got to do something to get some money into people's pockets because, I'm reading stories every day of food banks are backing up, and the number of people who are potentially losing their homes are backing up. The unemployment numbers are getting a little bit better, but still not great, as long-term unemployment is still way through the roof. So there's a lot of work to be done. And, some of those people are going to be Democrats, but some of those people are also going to be Trump supporters. So for me, there's an opportunity to, as Joe Biden has said, he's going to be president for everyone, to help everyone.
Absolutely. I think one of the key lessons of recent elections is that you don't gain votes primarily in places that you're winning. You want to gain votes actually in places you're losing. You want to go from losing places 70-30 to like 68-32. And what's been happening is we've been going in the wrong direction in a lot of areas of the country where the people keep being like, Trump in 2016 maxed out. And it turns out, no, in a lot of these areas, he was able to turn out additional people and pad his margins in exurban and rural America. And I think that it's going to take an all-of-government approach by Biden, be it in these budget negotiations, which he's going to have to engage in, which are going to be high stakes because they might be about the only bills that pass Congress. Honestly, even if Georgia Senate race goes well, you're still looking at a 50-50 Senate and a relatively narrowly separated out House. I don't think there's going to be a ton of legislation coming down the pike.
Right.
But those budgets got to help everyone, and then each part of the executive branch needs to be focused on delivering tangible results to all people. You don't need Republican cabinet officers to deliver results to Republican voters and make Republican voters at least a little bit more curious about voting Democratic. You need capable Democrats who believe in government helping people. That's who you need in order to convert Republican voters. They're not looking for a token in the administration. They're looking for actionable advantages in their own lives.
Right, because one of the things that I think we can agree on that this moment in history has brought us is the reality that people are hurting. People are angry that the thing that I grew up believing, that if you work hard, you play by the rules, you get ahead, that's broken. And that path to the middle class for working people has been diverted into, a major detour. To help people get back to that ability to make sure that their kids live in safe neighborhoods, have a roof over their head, have people with good jobs, with some health and retirement security. For me, that's the way forward. And as I said the day after the election, I started working on a picket line to help get people to fight for better wages, hours, and conditions. Because to me, whether you're one of the MAGA people who want to make America great, or you're one of the Build Back Better people, for me, it starts right there in fighting the right fights.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you look at the 1960s, which was a period of incredible improvement in the rules and laws of society, be it civil rights or the advent of Medicare and so many other programs in the 1960s, that came about amidst a time of high union density and a very solid economy. It's honestly the case. It's not ideal, but people are often the most generous, most open to new ideas when they feel secure, and they get the most territorial when they feel insecure. And so the economy has made so many people more precarious than they were before. And that is both terrible for their individual lives, but it also just tends to make people who are feeling insecure are just not really as communal in their orientation as people who feel more confident in their status.
No, I agree with you.
Yeah.
No, I agree. One of the areas that I'm not so thrilled with Joe Biden on yet, maybe I'm going to be wrong, and I hope I am proven wrong, And one of the areas that I had agreed with Donald Trump in 2016 is China is a problem. China is a huge problem. And, they've been basically robbing us blind for so long. That now, during the campaign, they tried to paint Joe as just China's choice. I'm curious, how you see Joe Biden handling what is, things like intellectual property rights, which Biden has said is one of the key and important issues to deal with, where I don't really give a rat's behind about intellectual property rights. I'm curious your thoughts.
I mean, I think that intellectual property rights being lost are the natural result of shipping factories to a country. And all of a sudden, people, if you're building the plants and looking at the blueprint, you're going to kind of be able to reverse engineer anything that you designed. I mean, and the Chinese government has been very clear that they have to get access to all the key information if you're going to be building factories and plants in the country. So, I mean, the intellectual property issues were built into the system, and intellectual property is by definition owned by rich people and or corporations, and therefore shareholders who are vastly disproportionately the rich. And so, yeah, that is not really where I think the core of American policy should be. Honestly, if you're trying to in-source American manufacturing and bring work back to this country, you kind of want China to steal intellectual property of stuff made in China, because that would then give corporate executives a better incentive to bring that work back to the US, where they will have greater intellectual property rights. Now, that doesn't mean I'm necessarily a huge enthusiast for the concept of intellectual property rights as they're exercised in America. Giving people monopoly rights on ideas has all sorts of distortions, and just is how Bill Gates became rich and all these other sources of inequality. But nonetheless, if we're going to have an intellectual property system, it's kind of better if it's going to get stolen overseas, and that gives an incentive to people to bring back that work to the United States.
Exactly. As I've always said, there's a place where your intellectual property is pretty secure. It's right here. So don't go over there. It seems real simple to me. And also, we're going to need to gather the globe to fight back on currency manipulation, on dumping, on all of the mercantilist policies that they pursue. It's going to take all of us. And with Joe Biden, I'm really hopeful that that's actually going to happen. But Jeff, I appreciate the time as always. I appreciate the work that you guys do there at the Center for Economic and Policy Research. Always good stuff. Thanks so much, man.
Thank you.
Jeff Hauser, the executive director of the Revolving Door Project there at the Center for Economic and Policy Research. Make sure you check out their website, therevolvingdoorproject.org. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1798. That was the day Kentucky became the first state to nullify an act of the United States Congress. The federal government had passed the Alien and Sedition Acts during the presidency of John Adams. These laws were passed as a reaction to the French Revolution and an undeclared naval war with France. These acts had several consequences. They increased the residency requirement for American citizenship from 5 years to 14. They allowed the president to imprison or deport immigrants considered to be dangerous to the peace and safety of the United States. And they effectively limited speech, which was critical of the federal government. Kentucky argued that states had the right to declare unconstitutional any acts of Congress that were not authorized by the Constitution. There was much uproar by other states due to Kentucky's nullification stance. These two acts were eventually allowed to expire a few years later in 1800 and 1801, but they were the forerunner for later federal laws that would be wielded against the labor movement. The Espionage and Sedition Acts, which were passed in 1917 and 1918 during the U.S. involvement in World War I, echoed much of the same spirit of the earlier acts. Under these new laws, in July 1917, nearly 1,200 strikers at the Phelps Dodge copper mine in Arizona, many of them of Mexican descent, were loaded on found to railroad cattle cars without food or water and left in the New Mexico desert. In September that same year, the Justice Department staged massive raids on the Industrial Workers of the World offices, arresting 169 union leaders. In 1918, labor leader Eugene V. Debs was in prison for opposing the United States entry into World War I. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Big high walls can be troublesome. Ask Humpty Dumpty. However, for a real-life epic story about wall troubles, ponder the trials and tribulations of our very own president. He can't seem to get his one big beautiful wall funded or even taken seriously, much less built. Trump has continuously demanded that Congress shell out more than $10 billion of our taxpayer dollars to erect a monster of a wall across some 2,000 miles of the U.S. border with Mexico, ranting that his magnificent edifice would keep aliens from entering the U.S. from the south. But even when his own party controlled both houses of Congress, his grand scheme went unloved, unfunded, and unbuilt. Still, he persists. In January, he directed officials to put up a demonstration section of his 30-foot tall wall to show the world how effective the Trump bulwark would be. But the thing blew over, not from a hurricane-force storm, but from moderate winds topping out at only 37 miles an hour. Embarrassing. More embarrassing was a personal visit Trump made to San Diego last September for a media event hailing a new SuperTech model of wall that he declared would be, quote, virtually impossible for violators to climb, signing his name on the structure. I tell you this strongly, Humpty Trumpety said, no more people can come in. But a climbing group in Kentucky built a replica of that wall and held an up-and-over competition. Winning time was 13.1 seconds. Dozens of competitors easily topped it, including an 8-year-old girl and a guy who climbed it one-handed while juggling various items with his other hand. This is Jim Hightower saying, one thing that truly is impenetrable is Trump's locked mind, refusing to let him see how silly this extravagant folly is.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Well, another one of those crazy scenarios thanks to our Supreme Court. Evidently today, the Supreme Court refused to reinstate a judge's order that required a Texas prison for the elderly to take reasonable, specific steps to protect them against the virus. I mean, after all, Friday we had over, 184,000 new cases. We're over 10 million in this country. And yet you've got these people who, they don't have the ability to social distance themselves or do all the things that need to be done. But today you had our Supreme Court reject the calls of Laddie Valentine and Richard King, two of the inmates who said that the prison isn't doing enough to protect them. And look, I don't doubt that they aren't. Evidently, our Supreme Court didn't give an explanation, but Soda Sotomayor and Elena Kagan dissented. They wrote, if the prison fails to enforce social distancing and mask wearing, perform regular testing, and take other essential steps, the inmates can do nothing but wait for the virus to take its toll. Sotomayor, writing for the two of them, said she fears further needless suffering. And you go, yep. Well, we're turning a prison sentence into now a death sentence. Sad, sad stuff. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on, well, the news of the day, our good friend Propane Jane. Jane, thanks for taking time for us.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me back.
Now's the time. Happy dance?
Does it feel happy, though?
Ultimately, yes. The reality is, I know on January 20th, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are going to be our next president and vice president, and there's going to be a moment where I hope, and I got to be hopeful, and this is where you're bringing me down, Jane. I got to hope that we start moving in a direction of sanity, because I'll tell you, I've been reaching my hand out to Trump supporters. We started a new platform, ThinkSpot, which is a right-wing, right to center, center right to, oh my God, crazy right. And the responses that I'm getting from people are really positive. So it is giving me some hope.
Oh, that's great news.
It is good news because, as I've been saying, look, not all Trump supporters are racists, clearly, but all the racists I know are Trump supporters. So if we can just get the non-racist Trump supporters to go, we're going to expel you, maybe we got a chance.
What is the content of the positive messages? What are they saying when you reach out to people who are receptive?
I'm clearly a labor guy. I'm an economic guy.
Right.
I'm someone who says, look, we need to have an economy that works for everybody. We need to get health care taken care of. We need to make sure that every person has access to health care, that every person has access to food and water and all of the basic necessities of life, a decent job, a voice on the job. I get very positive responses in those worlds. And I think that's a place to start. And I'll tell you, the day after the election, and I said this a minute ago, I started working on a picket line with 55 striking workers who their company wanted to, basically starve them with increases in their health care.
Right.
Half of those people voted for Trump. And I said, I don't care who they voted for. They are right now fighting the right fight. And for me, that's where we start. And that's how we win them over. Look, I'm not going to win everyone over, but we get 10% of them to come this way. We got a fighting chance of saving this country.
Right, and I agree with you there. And I think that, that brings the larger issue into focus, which is what we talk about over and over again, which is this idea that over and over again we see Republicans get into office, destroy the economy, and then Democrats come in to clean up the mess.
Right.
And I think even Republican voters are aware of that. They may not say it explicitly, but I do think that, when you see the stock market's response to Biden's victory, when you see, again, people on the ground sort of going, okay, this is what it is, I think that they're realizing that we have to get out of this mess. We are actually in a mess. The economy is not in good condition. The coronavirus is out of control. And I think even though they wanted that person there who tells it like it is and shares their same, ideology, at the same time, they know that over the last 4 years, they've ended up in a worse economic position than they started in.
Right.
I mean, that's just the bread and butter facts when they're at the kitchen table. And I think they want some relief from that, even though they may not have voted for that relief.
No, and these are the conversations I had with people because I've said, okay, did you get what you wanted in the 4 years? And everyone says, Trump did exactly what he said he was going to do, but it still hasn't, many of them, it hasn't made my life better.
Right.
We're still struggling to make ends meet. And even before the pandemic hit, many of the people who were very honest said, look, we're still struggling. Healthcare for me is the issue that every person in this country, I think, struggles with.
For sure. And I think it's sort of one of those things where, you have this big party, and then afterwards you have to clean up after the party. It may have felt great in the moment, right? But when you wake up and you see what the destruction is, you just want to get it cleaned up and get the mess fixed.
Yeah.
And so I think that while they may recognize that what he delivered was this chest-pounding, this opportunity to flaunt the cultural identity associated with Trumpism and to sort of say, okay, we're still on top. I think they really wanted to make that statement. And, Barack Obama has been very eloquent in, these, I don't know if you've seen the clips of the 60 Minutes interview and some of the excerpts that they've mentioned about his book that's about to come out, that even he acknowledges that so much of Trumpism was a white lash, a backlash to having this black president there, a fear that, my demographic is not on top anymore, and wanting to reassert, whatever cultural identity they identify with, which in many cases is white supremacy. And wanting to pound their chest about that. But I think, again, the result of that is just that, yes, you may feel more privileged because your guy was in the office, but again, has that actually improved your life tangibly what does your bank account look like? Do you have health care? Do you have a stable job? Your skin identity is only going to get you so far when you need to go buy groceries if you don't have any money, right? That's not going to get those groceries bought.
Right.
And so I think that the pain that and the destruction that has really been wrought over these last 4 years, people are still feeling that. I don't know if you've seen the clips of the long lines of people waiting for a food bank.
Yeah, I was just going to bring that up.
Out in Dallas, right?
The North Texas Food Bank evidently distributed more than 600,000 pounds of food to 25,000 people on Saturday alone. They handed out almost 7,300 turkeys, and saying, there were still people who, there was still need there.
Exactly. I mean, the amount of people, the millions that are, on unemployment in the state of Texas. And even though the state went red, of course, in Dallas, that's a blue city, but ultimately the economy in Texas is really suffering. And I think even though those, the majority of Texans unfortunately pulled the lever for Trump, again, that isn't actually improving our economic conditions. And I think we're going to continue to see over the next couple of months, things continue to get worse. I don't know if Greg Abbott's going to actually shut the state down. I don't think that he will. I think that, most of these Republican leaders are just going to, ride this till the wheels fall off.
Yep. And I don't think Joe Biden will either, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, I think the backlash to shutting down, and even, I think from a scientific standpoint, it isn't really certain that shutting down completely is going to contain the virus more than, following public health guidelines, wearing a mask, social distancing.
And we're not doing that either, clearly.
Exactly. But I do think that, over the next couple of months, things are going to get worse. And so when Biden gets in there, I think the conditions will be so bad that a lot of these Republicans are going to have to actually do something instead of, and maybe they'll have the freedom to do it without Trump breathing down their necks. But something's going to have to give.
No, I'm with you. In fact, I have a listener who sends me his model, and he updates it, and he said, by January 1st, we're going to be losing 3,000 people a day. Because it's just going to exponentially get worse and worse and worse. We got to make it through April when they claim the vaccine will be available.
Right.
And that's to me, that's our only hope through this.
I agree. And even then, who knows how many people will, be jumping at the chance to get a vaccine. I think that's the scary part. As a doctor, I just think about how hard it has been over the last couple of years, even before the pandemic hit, to get people to be compliant with vaccines. No, I mean,
crazy.
Don't forget the anti-vaxxer movement.
No, it's crazy, but we live in this world, Jane, that is, in having these conversations, and I've had some, over the years, spatterings, but I've had intense conversations with people who have, completely different views than I have. And when you start talking about where are you getting your information,
right.
We live in really informational, deserts, where, they're only seeing certain things. And I said, please send it to me and we'll talk about whatever it is you're getting.
Right.
Because we seem now on both sides, the far right and the far left, to live in these worlds of, well, we've got our own ideas, our own rules, our own facts, our own everything, and never the two shall ever meet.
Right. Right. And that's another thing that Barack Obama mentioned. He said, we're in an epistemological crisis. And I think that's true on so many levels because there's this echo chamber where so much of what's spinning around is disinformation and misinformation. And, the idea that because something's on the internet, it must be true.
Right.
That's really been a plague on our society for decades now. I can think back to when we didn't have the internet. I mean, I'm not that old. I'm not that young either. I just turned 39. But thinking about the impact that the internet has had, that social media has had, in that confirmation bias of I see people who look like me, who think like me, saying things that, sound familiar in terms of what I believe internally, so it must be right. And not actually seeking out sources of factful information, and not having access to, an education beyond high school. I think for a lot of people, that's coming to bite us in the butt, because people don't want to listen to the scientists. There's this idea that, okay, they're experts, they're elitists, they're snobs. And so the vilification of people who are educated is so strong right now, that, you have Dr. Fauci who has to have a security detail because he has death threats. Whereas within the scientific community, I mean, this is a man who is so well regarded within the, physician community that it's so hard for me to even think about how could people be vilifying this man who's trying to save lives. But again, I think that people want to listen to sources that confirm what they already believe.
And how do you change that? I mean, one of the things that I've always tried to do here on the program is I've never heard of your website. The chances of me regurgitating a story that came off of some website I've never heard are nil. It's never going to happen. Right. I try and stick to stories that come from mainstream media sources, and even those I question to a bit.
Right.
But there's got to be some middle ground of I'm not getting InfoWars, I'm not getting Alex Jones, I'm not getting Stormfront or whatever other crazy sites are out there. And equally on the other side, I'm not getting the other side only as well. I do read them, and I do find them comical on certain levels.
Right.
But I try and stay somewhere with reputable sources that actually have some bit of journalistic integrity. And I think, is there a way back to that, or has Facebook and Twitter and our all of our feeds done away with that?
I think it's done away with that, sadly. And I think the media has done such a piss poor job of, this idea of fair and balanced, and we have to put both sides on the table so that we can hear both sides, where one side has completely gone into the extreme of no facts are necessary. It's alternative facts. And so when you have both of those viewpoints there, and then just going, well, we're just going to leave it there, and not actually saying this is the factual information. I mean, certainly, towards the end now, we're seeing all these tweets from Trump being marked as misinformation, but it's almost too late, right? I mean, the damage has already been done. And so I really do think that there's going to have to be a very serious look at regulating social media, and also regulating our, news media, the fairness doctrine, things that we used to have that kept our society from devolving into this complete lunacy.
Do you think the fairness doctrine is possible, given the fact that we have so many opportunities for outlets? I mean, I'm not sure how you would go about returning to those days. I mean, it was easy when you regulated the radio stations, you regulated the TV stations, and that was really how you mass, and also newspapers. That was how you got to the mass of people. With today's internet, I mean, I don't know how you would claw that back.
Well, I think that it starts with accountability for the misdeeds that have been done. I mean, if you think about it, with Facebook and the whole Cambridge Analytica thing, they still haven't suffered any consequences for that.
True.
And so, yes, you're right. If we don't actually hold them accountable, I don't think there's any way to rein it in. But if we just go back to, looking at the damage that's been done and who actually did it, and where laws have actually been broken, and maybe these are some things that actually need new law. Maybe, all of the cybersecurity and the investigations that they've had to do over the last couple of years could guide us into that direction. But again, we've had a Congress that's been completely unwilling to do anything about this. Well, a Republican Congress that hasn't been willing to do anything about it because it's benefited them. The misinformation has allowed them to continue winning elections. And so I think it's going to take a massive social movement. And, we're fighting on so many fronts. I recognize that adding another fight just seems kind of daunting. But again, if we really want a society that is based in truth, rather than all of this opinion, we're going to have to start somewhere.
Yeah. No, and then you got to decide on what truth is. I mean, my whole life there was some truths. Most of those truths are now being overturned as not. And I think this is part of the chaos that I'm getting from a lot of my MAGA I'm going to say they're still MAGA friends. But now they're looking. They're also looking because they realize Trump's gone. They realize that I think from what I've gotten, what's in front of us is unsustainable. But they're seeing the entire world that they were raised on. In fact, the one guy said, I'm just a white kid from the Midwest. You're telling me everything that I've ever learned is a lie. And there's this belief that everything that they were raised to believe was wrong.
Yeah. I mean, and in many ways it is. I mean, I think that again, this idea that American history, in many ways, was written by people who were oppressing other people and not letting those stories of the oppressed filter to the top. And so you do have a history that is very one-sided, and I think leaves out so many large chunks of the struggle for marginalized people. And that's how you end up with, people still denying that systemic racism exists. And not actually knowing, okay, when you put the Confederate statues out, but you don't actually tell the story of the genocide that's attached to that, well, that's how people can be miseducated their entire lives. And, again, I just go back to the basics of science and math. This is why right now Trump is, he's trying so hard to deny reality, but he's losing in court because the facts actually matter.
Right.
The facts of, you can say it was rigged all you want to, but where is the evidence of that?
No, this is what I talked about last week. I said, one of the things I love about lawyers is, when you're on the street, they're going to lie to you like crazy. But the second they walk into that courtroom and have to stand in front of that person wearing the black robe, they quickly become truth tellers.
Absolutely.
And when they come out and they tell you there's nothing here, sorry, you believe them.
Exactly. And the same thing with the pandemic. Trump keeps saying, oh, it's going to disappear. Nobody's going to talk about it. As of November 4th, nobody's going to talk about it anymore. Well, we're still talking about it because people are still dying.
Right.
The hospitalizations are still going up. The case numbers are still going up. Those are cold, hard facts. That's science and that's math. You can't deny science and math.
And by Inauguration Day, it's going to be exponentially worse than it is today.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of these Republicans who, right now are, acting like it's no big deal will suddenly do a 180 when Biden's in office and try to pin it all on him. And so I think that's why, this effort that they're making to not, assist Biden in the transition, to not have his pandemic response start now, is very much in trying to sort of absolve Trump for all of his ineptitude and his incompetence, and lump all of that onto Biden. But again, we have this memory. We know what we've been through. And so I think it's our job to just continue to tell the truth about what we've experienced.
Yeah. But ultimately, I still look at the results, and I look at Pennsylvania where the numbers, again, the math doesn't lie.
Right.
Without Joe Jorgensen, Trump wins Pennsylvania. It just is what it is. We're that divided of a state, and having those conversations of how we not be that divided a state, I think is important. And what's happened is we've pitted Philadelphia and Pittsburgh against the rest of the state, and they've done it very well. It's my hope that, as I'm trying to reach out to folks in those rural communities where I live, and try and bring some folks around. You're not going to bring all of them, but some of them. And to me, that's the work going forward.
I agree. And we need a ton of that in Texas, too.
So last line of questioning I've got for you, because you got to be a little bit happy. I mean, you had to do a little bit of a happy dance that Kamala Harris is of the vice
I
president.
absolutely did
come
a happy dance. I absolutely did a happy dance. And, I think just the relief of this, there isn't going to be 4 more years of this. Because that's what I think that our society could not tolerate. We would not be able to withstand another 4 years of this disaster. And so it was definitely happy, but also just relief. I mean, I sobbed for a couple of hours that Saturday because, although I really wanted it to happen, I was optimistic that it could happen. There was still that element of, oh crap, what if he actually pulls this off? So I think the opportunity that lies ahead for both of them, everything I'm hearing in terms of who they've put on their transition team, they have experts on systemic racism. They have a sizable amount of, people of color on the team. And so just the idea of getting people who are serious about solving the problems that we face is just a breath of fresh air.
Where do you see them going initially? I mean, clearly Georgia is the center of the universe. If Georgia doesn't go the Democrats' way, it's going to be a long uphill ride.
Right.
Where do you see things going in the event that they don't get the Senate?
It looks like, to me, they're going to have to try to forge some alliances with the sort of, if you can call them that, moderate Republicans. I think Mitt Romney, Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, they're going to have to try to peel away some of those Republicans and get them to, work on some of this common sense legislation. I do think that, Mitch McConnell, I think his goal is to be an obstructionist. But there's a part of me that doesn't think he will be as obstructionist to Joe Biden as he was to Barack Obama. And again, going back to Barack Obama, what he was saying about there being a fundamental ickiness amongst the Republicans in the Senate of not wanting to look like they did anything to help the first black president. And I very much believe that they did set out to try to make him a one-term president. They did have that meeting,
well, they
right
said
after
it. I mean,
inaugurated, right?
Yeah, there's no guessing about that. McConnell came out and said, we're going to make him a one-term president.
Absolutely.
Rush Limbaugh came out and said, I hope he fails.
Exactly. And I think that wisdom of black voters when they, came out in South Carolina and sort of shocked the world by choosing Joe Biden, that idea that this white man, this man who's been in the Senate for 30 years, who's worked with these people, who's worked with segregationists, in fact, this is a man who has a relationship with Mitch McConnell. This is somebody he calls a friend. And will that make the difference in, maybe it won't help us get, these huge things that we want done, but around the margins in terms of, again, like we're saying, these bread and butter issues, the HEROES Act, passing some type of stimulus to try to get the economy going, I think even though it's very cynical and even though it's very hurtful to think that, is that all it's going to take is just getting a white guy in there for them to finally be cooperative, I think that's the truth of the matter.
I hope you're right. I hope McConnell comes around. I don't see it happening, but I love your optimism.
I think they know that they need to get something done, or else we're all going to continue to suffer as a country.
Yeah, I don't think they care. I think if McConnell would have moved on a stimulus package over the summer, Trump would have probably gotten reelected. And they deliberately chose to not care about even their own constituents. So while I love the optimism, and I hope you're right, I hope we get something moving forward. I just don't see it without McConnell getting his pound of flesh.
Well, he may get a pound of flesh. I mean, there may be some of those tough conversations. Again, I don't, the inner workings of the Senate, I will never understand these gentleman handshakes that go on. But I think if anybody knows how to wheel and deal, it's Joe Biden.
There you go. But I'm glad to hear you were at least a little bit happy. That's a good start. And as we go forward, the goal for me, trying to reach out and figure out ways to bridge some of the gaps. I'm not going to do it with everybody, but at least with some. As always, Jane, I appreciate the time. It's always great talking with you.
You too. Have a great week and be safe.
You as well. Our good friend Propane Jane. Let's take our quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. Listen to the Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2006. That was the day mounted police charged 50 janitors and their supporters during a protest in Houston. SEIU's Justice for Janitors campaign had been organizing for years throughout the South and Southwest. Modeled on success achieved in California, SEIU broadened their campaign to Houston and Miami. The union called a month-long strike against the city's largest cleaning companies. Protests and civil disobedience actions continued throughout the strike. Hundreds of strikers routinely marched through the streets of Houston, beating drums and hauling bags of garbage into the middle of intersections to highlight the key services they provided to the city. They were subject to repeated threats of firings and arrests. When police charged at the janitors, it served to turn public support in favor of the strikers. By the end of the month, Tom Balinoff and SEIU Local 1 in Chicago claimed victory for 5,300 Houston janitors. The Chicago local had been central to the 3-year campaign in Houston. Incomes doubled and janitors finally had health insurance, paid vacations, and holidays. The Chicago Tribune detailed the campaign in a November 25th article. The union lobbied building owners and major corporations who held contracts with the cleaning companies. The union worked to gain a foothold among the janitors, sending in seasoned Latino janitors from Chicago to help with organizing. SEIU committed millions of dollars to the organizing drive, setting aside $1 million alone in strike funds. At a victory rally, union leader Flor Aguiar proclaimed, "No one thought a group of poor Latinos from Houston would be able to win anything. But today, we can lift our heads up very high." For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, wow, I thought the Catholic Church was bad. The Boy Scouts are having their moment in the sun. And, I saw the story, something like 82,000 cases of child, fiddling around with. And I'll tell you, it's horrible. It's a horrible thing. But it made me think, and I know this is horribly selfish, but I got kicked out of both of them. I got thrown out of being an altar boy and thrown out of being a Boy Scout. So I guess lucky me. I guess that's the way I dodged both bullets. Sad, sad stuff. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on, the top stories of the day, our good friend, former Congressman and political analyst Bob Ney. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thank you, Rick.
So Boy Scouts having their moment in the sun. Evidently, they've narrowed it down to 82,663 cases as of Sunday of sexual abuse by folks in the Boy Scouts. Are you surprised it's that low?
I mean, it's a shame because a lot of people went through the Scouts and had great experiences, and it's just a shame that they, for all the people that such a bad experience and a traumatic, terrible thing happened to, and it's just like the church, if they, would police this, then it gets, obviously would be a lot lower than that kind of figure.
Yeah. What I was shocked at is that the Boy Scouts have $1 billion in assets.
Mm-hmm.
I was like,
it's a pretty big organization. I mean, I was surprised they had billions, but it's a large organization.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
When I was a kid, it was just a the local group. One of the fathers came. Sure. In our case, it was the priest who was the head of it. And when he threw me out of being an altar boy, he threw me out of Boy Scouts too, which I guess was a good thing. The altar boy thing, they'd wake me up at like 5 o'clock in the morning to go do, 5:30 mass. And there'd be like 3 people in the church, and there were 3 little old ladies who would come. And every time they would nod off, I'd ring the bells. And the priest would get upset about that, because I figured if I got to be awake, we're here for you.
Right.
You got to be awake too.
Exactly. I went to 12 years Catholic school, and I was in the altar boys. I was at one time president of the altar boys and served mass, when we used to do 7 days a week.
Yep.
And you had to have 2 servers in the morning.
Yep.
And, of course, I learned the mass in Latin.
Yeah, fortunately, I missed that.
Right. You're younger. I learned the mass in Latin.
Yeah, I still have all those scars of the Catholic Church, the Stations of the Cross and kneeling on the granite. I'm trying to forget that stuff.
I do have to say, with Sister Catherine, I learned to type in my sophomore year of high school with a ruler, and I kind of have to thank her. I can type today.
All right, that's great.
Ruler across the fingers when you miss, ASL.
Yeah, I see now I got the ruler across the fingers as well, because my mother taught me to write left-handed.
Oh, okay.
And evidently that was the sign of the devil.
Right.
So they literally beat that out of me, and I made my 4s like flags. Can't have closed 4s, so beatings for that.
So you had the early sign of the devil. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Gotcha.
Crazy. I always said if I needed bodyguards, Notre Dame nuns without question.
Right.
And if I find where they buried Sister Saint Rosemarie, I would dig her up to kill her again. But hey, let's move along, because evidently hate crimes are up at the highest level in more than a decade.
Did they say why in the article? I mean, do they have any? I mean, we know it's crazy, mean, horrible people, but is there any rationale as to why?
The way it's looking, the stories that I've read, it's the rise of these white supremacist groups that have dominated our hatosphere. Look, we've always had these groups around us. I mean, Pennsylvania is full of them. It's now that they're emboldened. Now they're having their rallies at the Capitol. Now they had a big one in D.C. Did you see the big rally in D.C.?
No, I didn't.
Lots of entertainment. And again, I started the show off with a George Carlin quote that I find quite amusing. In '99, Carlin said, "Angry men in combat fatigues talking to God on a 2-way radio and muttering incoherent slogans about freedom are eventually going to provide us with a great deal of entertainment." And that's what Saturday was.
Carlin really said some things that were ahead of his time.
Yeah, well, 1999, 21 years ago, he predicted this past weekend, because I watch these folks and I'm just going, wow, just crazy.
Because there was one speculation that it's risen because of better reporting by police departments, but I don't think that's the totalitarian reason of why it's happened.
Really, you think better reporting during the Trump administration?
No, they had they were talking about the fact that it wasn't Trump. It was some people that do research were talking about better reporting by police departments.
Okay.
But I don't think that. I think there might be some better reporting, but I don't think that's the cause of them being up.
All right, got it.
I really don't.
Either way, I mean, the story is what it is. We are a more hateful society, and I don't think that's a surprise to anyone.
No, and also, just to be frank, in watching some people's actions in the last month that I've seen out at places, I don't know these people. There's a lot of mean people that act out.
Yep.
A lot of mean things to other people, just over masks.
Oh no, over a lot of stuff. I was on election day. I was handing out flyers for a candidate that I like in the area, and unfortunately she lost by a small number of votes. Hopefully she'll run again. But the person that was the other side, I was there handing out stuff for her. The Republican candidate had a guy handing stuff out, and we were talking. We were having a good old time. Because people were coming through, and they were really really rude and angry to me, and I told the guy, I said, how about for 15 minutes we switch literature. I'll hand out stuff for your people, you hand out stuff for mine. And you can see what I'm talking about, how poorly treated I am. And he's like, no, I can't do that. But about an hour later, he goes, man, people are really rude to you. And I said, sadly, this is what I see from the Trump supporters. Look, there were a lot of Biden supporters there who, just took his literature and said thank you, and he moved along. The number of people who took something out of my hand, crumbled it up, and threw it on the ground was just amazing. One guy took one of the pieces of paper, blew his nose in it, and threw it on the ground to the girl who gave it to him. I mean, the level of craziness at levels I've never seen.
Well, yes, and also I think it, bleeds over to other aspects of life too. I just watch how people talk to each other, dare to accidentally cut in front of somebody in a grocery store, see what happens to you. I mean, it's just a lot of anger out there.
So how do we gain that civility back? Because look, you've been in a rural area most of your life. I'm trying to figure out how. I now live in a rural area. I'm trying to figure out how you bridge this divide between the urban community and the rural area that we've been pitted against one another. We've been told our values are different. We've been told our lifestyles are different. We've been told that we're completely different, and we have to basically hate each other in this Hunger Games. Is there a way to bridge this?
I don't know. I mean, it's just not the political people. I think sometimes, I used to say this, that the actions down below of people feed the political people. I've often said that.
So, because I
noticed a change. I was in office 24 years, and I noticed a change from the beginning towards the end. And now, of course, with people, Facebook, you post something. If they don't like what you post, you'll get a lot of personal insults, a lot, that are just amazing.
Yeah, I see. I don't do a lot on Facebook.
I don't get it.
It's not one of those things that I'm, and I guess the other part of it is, and I've read a bunch about this recently, because we don't let our kids do it either.
Mm-hmm.
And they want Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and TikTok and all these things where, they get instant feedback, good or bad, and I just don't think it's good for them.
Right. Well, no, and especially for kids. I mean, I don't post a whole lot, and I really have cut any political posts down 90%. If I post something, I don't post with comment, just something, except I did post, congratulations, President-elect Biden, and I received a lot of vile comments for posting that. But beyond that, I don't post a lot, but people will just have a free-for-all on comments, which is a free country and everything. But I think for kids it's a lot different too. If they believe this is the real world,
right?
It's not. I mean, I'd like to see people be this way face to face as much as they are on Facebook. They won't be.
No, I say that all the time too.
Right. Right.
But sadly, I mean, you look at this weekend's rallies. I mean, these group of people, they're looking for the fight. These are people who want to have that escalation that possibly is going to come, where people start saying this stuff to each other.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of anger.
Yeah,
a lot.
And I don't know how you tone that down, or how if elected leaders can. But there's got to be some civility going forward, and I'm still trying to figure out how we move forward. Now, Georgia, obviously the center of the universe. The senator from Georgia, David Perdue, has said no debates between now and January 5th. Are you surprised by that?
No, not really. I mean, I'm watching some comments. I think somebody, Perdue declined to debate the opponent ahead of the runoff, and I guess maybe it's a strategy he's got. And then I saw where a statement was made. I'm trying to remember which one of the candidates, that Chuck Schumer's not running here in Georgia. So I'm looking at this and I'm like, okay, they're going to try to localize two elections that are going to become national, if you know what I mean.
No, all the while, turd blossoms coming in to raise money, but they're going to localize it.
Well, that's what they're going to try to do. They're going to try to localize it. And again, I think that you're going to see so much national money in here that it's going to be. This is the place to be.
Yeah.
It's the place to be.
No,
No question about it.
The focus between now and January 5th is all going to be about Georgia, and the good people of Georgia are going to be sick of the attention by the end of it.
Right, and of course with Ossoff, he will running against Purdue. He's already going to say that, hey, Purdue's a coward. He won't he won't debate. Now I think they wanted to have 6 debates, if I'm correct.
Yeah, they wanted Purdue canceled one of the debates during the general because he really got his hat handed to him. I mean, Purdue got his hat handed to him in a bad way, and I don't blame him for not debating.
Sure, it's a strategy.
Yeah, it's probably his only strategy. But I just thought it was interesting that the guy who's named after the largest chicken producer in the country chickened out of the debates.
Right.
I had to throw that in there. Sorry, and I guess that's part of the problem, isn't it?
Well, I think that's okay. That's kind of a joke. I mean, that's what are you going to do?
Yeah, it's crazy. Let's talk
I mean,
fires.
Look, it's going to be tough for the Democratic side. I mean, if they can come out with a split, that will hold their own. Then it makes the Senate 51.
Right. Personally, I think Loeffler's going to lose because she's so unlikable.
Mm-hmm.
And she didn't win. She was appointed, so I think there's a possit that she goes down.
Possibility. Right.
Yeah, but we'll see. I'm still hopeful because I don't think anything gets done unless they're able to get those 2 seats. Well, I guess I'll ask you. If they don't get the majority, the 50-50 split with Harris casting the vote, do you see any legislation getting through?
Well, I think it's possible that some things, may happen because there's going to be a lot of heat eventually on, some of the senators. All it's going to take, with that close of a margin, all it takes, if the Republicans have 51.
Right.
All it's going to take is one person that wants to be, quote, sort of the kingmaker to exercise, a little bit of power, maybe for something good. I mean, I'm not saying exercising power is all for bad. All it's going to take is that to happen. Or if a couple of them, ideally, if 2 R's and 2 D's band together, then Katie barred the door. They're going to practically run the Senate, and that may, just work out for them.
Yeah,
there's going to be a lot of pressure, obviously, from both sides not to do that.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. Evidently, there's a lame duck fire sale going on. Evidently, we're auctioning off rights to the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, ANWR. Thoughts? I mean, is this the smart thing to do?
Well, I think that has always been, of course, the huge debate. But they're moving. I don't think it'll all go through. They're rushing to sell off the oil rights. Is exactly what they're doing. Right. I mean, they're moving so fast to sell off the oil rights, and I think that the companies are going to next week be able to actually kind of pick areas and say they're interested in doing it. But don't you assume that there's going to be some type of court action that eventually, there's only X amount of weeks left, that will stall this, and eventually it would be questioned. Or Biden can reverse it. Look, let's say they issue a contract in the next 2 weeks to 3 companies, right?
Right.
If you're head of those companies, are you actually going to sit there and say, I think I'll just start making, tens of millions of dollars of investment? If you know Biden's heading into office, I don't think you're going to do it. Don't get me wrong. It could be difficult for Biden to undo it. But, they would still face the fact that the federal law mandates the leases by the end of 2021. But he could impose some new restrictions on the leases.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how this.
Yeah, he could do that.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what they do and how much cleaning up Biden's going to have to do.
A lot.
A lot.
A lot, yeah. There's going to be this and that. Who knows what's going to happen? For example, internally in agencies from now to the end that we're not even going to hear about. Some type of change of direction in agencies, and then at some point in time, Biden is probably going to have some type of internal group within the White House that does nothing but work on what occurred from Election Day to swearing-in day. Really? He probably will.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to swearing in day. I can't wait to get through this. I just can't, because here's the thing. Every day I get emails from another group. Giuliani just sent me another email minutes ago, saying that we've now got information. We're going to overturn the whole election. Any chance of that? Do you see any path forward to undo what's already been done?
No, because look at Pennsylvania. Look, if anything could be overturned and it would make a difference, it would be Pennsylvania. Their main guts of what they were asking for in the court is gone.
Right.
It's gone. Now they're down to, well, there was some lack of action, of quick action, of letting our observers in. That's what they're down to. This is done. There's nothing that's going to hold up into the courts. Nothing. The only thing that can happen is if the Supreme Court of the United States, held up the December 14th electors that report to the House to make up the Electoral College. If the Supreme Court would do that, which I think is 99.9.5% that they won't, if the Supreme Court would do that, that is the only thing that then throws it into the House of Representatives. But otherwise, Rick, there is no legal path to do this.
It's
None.
over.
It's done.
It's done.
Pennsylvania, and in my opinion, if give Trump 2 more states, okay? Give him Arizona. Pennsylvania is done. The political challenge, the legal challenge is finished. Pennsylvania is finished, and so therefore no legal path exists.
Good. This way, January 20th, we move forward. But I'm hoping that the Trump supporters come around to that. But Bob, I appreciate the time as always.
Thank you.
Great stuff, my friend.
Thank you, Rick.
It's over. You heard it right there. Simple stuff. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1982. That Tuesday, the National Football League players ended their 57-day strike. The league scrambled to get the new season going, scheduling games for that very next Sunday. The shortened 9-game season included 2 games played before the walkout, and the rest after the strike ended. The biggest issue that led to the strike was compensation and benefits. The NFL had seen a surge in television revenue with a new 5-year contract worth $2.1 billion. The players asked for 55% of the league's growing profits. The Players Association also wanted a minimum pay scale based on years of service and improvements in health care and retirement benefits. The owners flatly refused. On September 20th, the Green Bay Packers beat the New York Giants in a Monday night football game. The next day, the New York Daily News reported, quote, "For the first time in its 63-year history, labor troubles will throw the NFL for a loss." By a unanimous vote of its executive committee, the league's Players Association yesterday voted to call a strike. The article continued by writing, quote, "The players stressed that they had been forced to call the strike in frustration over what they termed management's twin failures to take them seriously and to bargain in good faith." Sports Illustrated summed up fan sentiments about the strike with a cover headline reading, over the image of a deflated football. Finally, the two sides came to an agreement. The players won raises, bonuses based on years in the league, and severance packages for retiring players. But the gains were far below the union's goals. Bitterness lingered, and 5 years later, the players would be on strike once again. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So on Sunday, SpaceX launched the Falcon 9 rocket that carried the private space firm's Crew Dragon spacecraft Resilience into orbit. This is how this story goes. It's the first with a full crew. We've sent some astronauts, NASA astronauts, including Mark Hopkins, Victor Glover, Shannon Walker, and Japanese astronaut Soichi Noguchi, going to the International Space Station. And they're saying, "Hey, this is a great thing. It's wonderful. It's a landmark for NASA." And because evidently we've had to rely on the Russians to get to the space station, since we basically chucked all of our shuttle stuff. And this to me is another one of these moments where you go, I'm not thrilled by the fact that we've privatized our space program. I'm not thrilled that the dollars that went into the space program, which I've known some people over the years who worked at NASA, and they talk about all of the other inventions that came out of our space program. The fact that we took public dollars to invest in something that was, just high-minded and what most people thought unreachable or unattainable. That we did big things. That now we've privatized it. And if you have enough money, you can now go to space. It's now going to, this is a private venture. They've taken the technology that we had, that we developed, and the expertise that we cultivated, and they've privatized it. And it's something, again, that we've done time and time again. And what's frustrating is, people are right now screaming about socialism without actually understanding what it is. Nobody's talking about, and I heard David Perdue say, well, they've tried socialism in places like Cuba. And nobody's talking about Cuban-style socialism. Nobody's talking about Venezuela. We're talking about dulling the edges of capitalism, of having a tax code that reins in some of the obscene wealth and redistributes it in a way that actually benefits society. Like having good schools or health care. Because clearly our employer class is not doing this. And I've been saying for a long time, we've got serious structural problems in this country that benefit the very wealthy over everybody else. And it comes out when you start talking to people about their health care costs. I'm not that old, 53. I remember a day where healthcare was part of the job that you got. There was no copay, there were no deductibles, there was none of the stuff that we now take as commonplace today. They've trained us to expect less, to demand less. They've trained us to believe that they're the smart ones, that they work hard, that they deserve all of the wealth and spoils that they've grabbed. And trust me, as AI takes over and we continue down this path of automating more jobs and doing away with we the people, they're going to continue to grow more powerful and wealthy. And what's that going to mean for the rest of us? I'm not talking about full-blown socialism where the government owns the factors of production. I'm talking about a safety net that makes sure that nobody falls through it. And that government is the employer of last resort when and if private corporations can't or won't create enough opportunity. Government demand is something that is absolutely necessary. And to see something like our space program privatized is heartbreaking. And it's one of those things where it was a source of national pride. And now it is just another profit motive item. It's just another thing that's going to make somebody wealthy and that ultimately we pay for. So to me, while it's a great thing that we got to the space station, that we're still participating in that, for me it's a sad day in that we've privatized it. It's now no longer just ours. It's a corporate special interest. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Big week ahead. Lots going on. Cannot wait to see what comes up next. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith